Hello, I'm Dr. Breanna Hetland, Assistant Professor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I'm an active member of the CAN's Early Career Special Interest Group and had the pleasure of serving as its inaugural chair. The purpose of the Early Career Special Interest Group is to engage the early career members of the Council in activities to advance nursing science through developing leadership and scholarship. If you are interested in joining our charge, please visit our early career page on the CAN's website. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this panel, Avoiding the Traps of the Early Career Nurse Scientist. In the beginning stages of a nurse scientist career, there are many potential obstacles that can be prevented if you know how to prepare for them. Our panelists will identify some of these more common traps encountered in early career and discuss ways to avoid them, focusing on imposter syndrome, always saying yes, maintaining focus, and work-life management. By highlighting personal experiences and how they handled them, this panel will discuss ways to remain steadfast in your career trajectory, even when these obstacles threaten to impact your work. During this session, you will hear from 4 early career nurse scientists who will offer personal insight into the challenges faced in the early stages of a nurse researcher's career. Dr. Nancy Diaz is an assistant professor at East Carolina University. Dr. Diaz completed her PhD at Duke University School of Nursing. She has developed expertise in designing mixed methods research and gained experience executing scientific skills such as recruitment, data collection, data management, data analysis, as well as data dissemination. Dr. Diaz's strong international clinical and teaching experiences have laid a solid foundation upon which to further her research skills. Her academic record and personal history reflect conscientiousness, determination, and ability to master and pursue her career in nursing research. Dr. Diaz's long-term career goal is to develop a program of research that focuses on identifying and testing interventions to help bereaved parents improve their health outcomes. Dr. Alyson Hanish is an assistant professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. She received her Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Master of Science in Nursing, and PhD in Nursing degrees from the University of Iowa. Dr. Hanish completed a pre-doctoral fellowship with the National Institute of Nursing Research Graduate Partnership Program. She completed her postdoctoral training at the University of Nebraska Medical Center through the Leadership, Education, and Neurodevelopment and Related Disabilities postdoctoral program at the Monroe-Meyer Institute for Genetics and Rehabilitation, and a postdoctoral fellowship at the UNMC College of Nursing. Dr. Hanish is currently the PI of a clinical trial titled A Smart Design to Improve Sleep Disturbance in Adolescents with Neurodevelopmental Disorders, funded by the National Institutes of Health, National Institutes of Nursing Research. Dr. Rachel Pozzar is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Dr. Pozzar's research focused on the relationships between patient-provider communication and ovarian cancer care quality, ovarian cancer care treatment decision-making, and quality of life among individuals with ovarian cancer. Dr. Pozzar's doctoral dissertation focused on patient perceptions of the ovarian cancer care process and highlighted the role of psychosocial factors in ovarian cancer care decisions. Dr. Ansley Stanfill is an associate professor and the associate dean for research at the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center. She holds a joint appointment in the College of Medicine, Department of Genetics, Genomics, and Informatics, and a faculty appointment in the UTHSC Neuroscience Institute. Her work is on the influence of genetic and epigenetic factors and long-term outcomes in neurological injury and chronic disease. She received her PhD in 2014 from the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center for her dissertation titled Dopaminergic Genetic Contributions to Obesity in Kidney Transplant Recipients, for which she was awarded an NINR F31 training grant. Dr. Stanfill also completed postdoctoral training in omics research at the University of Pittsburgh, supported by an NINR T32 titled Targeted Research and Academic Training of Nurses in Genomics. She is currently PI of a $1.1 million NINR R01 titled A Multivariate Predictive Model for Long-Term Disability Post-Subarachnoid Hemorrhage in Caucasian and African American Populations. She received a supplemental award to this project to investigate genotype and gene expression interactions using the GTEx database. She also serves as a co-investigator on an NIA-funded R01 investigating the potential of MIR21 as a biomarker for vascular dementia.
Hello, this is Nancy Dias. I'm an assistant professor at East Carolina University, and today I'm going to talk about, yes, how to avoid agreeing to do all the things. As I said, I'm an assistant professor, so I don't see myself as an expert in this topic, but would like to share some of the things I am doing in order to make sure that my plate doesn't overfill. So just to go to the next slide, I want to, there's no conflict of interest I have to disclose. Moving on, so here's how I intend doing my presentation. So the outline, just to make sure I'm staying on my topic, I want to focus my content on what it is to be a visionary, how you plot a plan, how do you prioritize, remember more is not always better, how do you stay focused, how do you maintain work-life balance, and finally, how would you recognize when your plate is full? So to begin, being a visionary. When we talk about visionary, we often think, oh, you have to be a leader, or you have to be this extra special person to be a visionary. But I see being a visionary, we all as being a visionary, as in having a vision to where we want to go in our career, to what's our research goals, what's the research pathway, and what do we want to achieve in that pathway. So I said, have a presbyopic view, as in have that far-sighted view, as in the vision, the vision for yourself, but do not forget to wear those eyeglasses to stay focused on your short term. Okay, so be the visionary by looking what's out there, knowing what's out there that you want to achieve, but have a plan ready for what you want to do in the short term. So let's take this about having that short-term plan. And that is plotting a plan. Now, typically, most of us researchers are in tenure track. And depending on the institute that you are in, you might have a 3, 4, 5, 6-year plan to achieve that tenure. So make sure you set your goals for each of those years. And I will show you what we adopt and what I have used at East Carolina, how we set up the yearly goals for us, so that we build on every year to achieve that tenure and also work towards your vision that you want to achieve for yourself. The next is strategize. So what do I mean by strategize? We have these goals and we have so many things that we need to do with regards to our research, teaching, service. What I've done is I tried to interconnect some areas. Like, for example, my service and research. I've tried to combine it in such a way that it is pertinent for me in my research career and goals as well. So my service, have been deliberate in choosing and identifying either the organization or the leadership role I take, or the networks that I'm connected with, or the voluntary positions that I take. I make sure that it is focused and related to my research area. My research area is end-of-life, pediatric palliative end-of-life and bereavement care. And so organizations like HPNA are of interest to me. The palliative care research group is interest to me. So I try to find areas that I can volunteer and provide my service in those areas. But at the same time, I'm networking with that group of people as well. So that falls back to the next thing, which I say, be selective. So while you're strategizing, make sure you are identifying these selective organizations and networks that fall into your research goals, your research trajectory. And as you identify those organizations and networks, and then you are trying to take some leadership roles, make sure that you know what the roles and responsibilities of that role is, because sometimes we may take it on and say, oh, I want that title, I want to be the chair of that particular committee. But if I do not know what that committee entails, and it takes more time and energy than you thought you had, then you are probably setting up yourself for failure. So before I take any position, I ask them what it is that I will be doing in that position. How many kind of an average of what my hours of work or time commitment would be. It was interesting. Recently, I received an email which said, "Would you be the chair representative for a particular committee?" And I'd never been part of the committee, so I did not pay attention to the representative word, and I immediately sent an email back saying, I am not sure whether I can take the chair's role because I have never been part of that committee, and I need to understand that role better. Um, and the person immediately responded back and said, I appreciate you asking specifics because you do not have to be the chair. You're just representing me at times when I'm not able to attend certain meetings. And I said, okay, if that's the specific commitment, I want to make sure what my commitment is before I take it on. Also, remember to take on leadership roles slowly. So walk before you run. Start by volunteering. Start by being part of the committee before you take any admission roles. So how to avoid saying yes for everything? Say yes if it is part of your plan, because that way then you are able to make sure that it doesn't seem extra, an additional burden. So I talked about setting goals. I just want to share this document with you of how we set our goals for every year in the 3 areas typically that universities function: teaching, research and creative activity, and service, based on the time allocation based on the role that you play. And then we set objectives for that particular year and very specific outcomes, like obtain at least 1 more peer review, obtain student evaluation. So something very specific. This tool is, 1, it helps guide you what you need to achieve. 2, it also helps you for your self-evaluation, and 2, the department for their evaluation. So take all these areas, and if your institute does not have this, I would encourage you trying to do this for yourself as part of your setting goals for yourself. What's the next thing? Prioritize. So as I said, every institute has, usually they follow the tripartite kind of mission, whether it's research, teaching, and service, and depends on what is the focus or what is the high priority of your institute. That's what would be required, and that particular structure would be set up for your tenure. So make sure you, first of all, when you're taking your job, you're aware of that and you know that that is what you want to do and that's the direction you want to go. In addition to that, your individual goals also. Sometimes the institute might have research as the focus, but that might not be the direction you want to go. Or vice versa. Sometimes an institute might have teaching as the priority, but for your personal self, you want to excel in research. And so prioritize your goals based on what you want to do and what the direction you want to head. For again, in my institute is more teaching focused. However, I am part of a department which is the PhD nursing science department, and where we focus on developing the nursing science, and therefore research becomes my priority. And so my individual goals, if you saw in the slide before that, my percentage of work was dedicated to research, and so there were more tasks and more objectives or outcome measures that I tried to meet in order to help me achieve that. So say yes if it falls into your priorities. Make sure that whatever you take on is helping you meet those priorities that you have set and the institute requires of you. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I'm just clicking the wrong slide. Next is stay focused. So you have your vision, you have your goals, you've set up your plan, and sometimes you do get distracted. So when opportunities come, you want to make sure, is it an opportunity towards your goal and tenure track, or is it a distraction? So always keep the eye on the prize. Okay. Remember with tenure track, you have to publish, write manuscripts. There is the saying, publish or perish. But basically, most of the organizations require that you publish a set number of articles in order to for you to go for tenure. So make sure you are meeting those goals and staying focused on meeting those particular goals. And grant writing is another requirement. So create a pipeline for these, for your articles, for your grant writing, and so make sure that as you're setting your priorities and you're planning yourself, that the pipeline articles that would come next, or the pipeline project, is part of that workload that you have, that you intend to do for that particular year, so that you're staying again on target to achieve whatever goals you set for yourself. The other way I look at also and staying focused is making sure that you are kind of sometimes picking on assignments or tasks based on your strengths or weaknesses. Like for example, if I know I'm good at writing a grant, but I'm not very good at writing articles, or I'm not, I need to improve my writing skills, my scientific writing skills, then I would try to seek opportunities that will help me strengthen those weaknesses. And so identifying your weaknesses and trying to identify the opportunities to help build on those weaknesses would be another way to keep yourself staying focused and keep making sure you're on target to what you want to achieve. Okay. So while we are doing all of these things, we always talk about maintaining a work-life balance. And I think it is very important when you make these decisions of saying yes, whether you are keeping that in mind. Because I don't see that family or career should be a choice. I think we need to be able to be part of both and be happy doing both. What I try to do is if I'm involved in a particular project, or if I'm doing something that is really important, which is not, of course, like a regular task, oh, I have to grade a paper or but something like writing a grant, or there's a manuscript deadline, I let especially my children know, because they seek look out for my time or want my time. So I let them know, okay, mama's going to be busy this particular day, or this weekend I might not be able to give as much time. I might have to focus on this. So I tell them that, involve them, and inform them about the important deadlines that are coming up. It is important, while we are maintaining our work-life balance, that you follow your passion. It becomes a drag if you do not like what you're doing. And especially sometimes with tenure track, it could be a drag when you're trying to achieve those goals that you need. But if you identify, I think we all have been told this, identify a research area that you are passionate about, that you would like to spend the time doing, investigating, and then spending time writing about it. It makes the workload much easier and more acceptable. And so follow your passion. But as you follow your passion and you're trying to meet this balance yourself between family and career, you want to make sure that you set your work time boundaries. That's an important thing I thought I do for myself. Like, for example, even for the daily time, right, for every day, I kind of make sure that I try to work within whatever 8 to 4, 5, 6, but specific times, so that I'm not sitting in front of my computer all day, or looking at my phone all day, responding to emails all day. I make sure my evenings, I set up few hours in order to stay focused on my children, or do what I need to do for the family, and take care of myself. So self-care is important as well. So try to have fun. I say take the time to do what makes your soul happy. Know what you want to do, what makes you feel kind of detox, kind of de-stress. Identify what it is. It could be just taking a walk. It could just be sitting on the couch at times and doing nothing, or just watching TV, or meeting a friend. But do take time to indulge in self-care, because again, stress, burnout and stress kind of builds on when you do not do that. So I would say yes. If you're able to, typically what we do is, okay, I got this time and I might take that time out from my personal time. So I would kind of make sure that you watch out for that and say yes if you still can have time to take care of yourself. Okay, moving along. So how would you know when your plate is full? I would look at these. Do I meet the deadlines? Am I able to, or I'm doing last minute work and so compromising quantity versus quality? Am I enjoying what I do? Or am I, again, stressed and feeling burned out? How do I know if I'm stressed? Whatever. Am I irritable? Am I feeling tired? I'm not sleeping? Or whatever ways you identify yourself as having stress. Make sure you recognize your signs of stress. The other important thing I said is, while we sometimes are aware of our plate being full, I just encountered a situation yesterday when I was part of a new committee, and how they were, this question of should I say yes arose because they were trying to find a chair for the committee, and nobody wanted to be the chair of the committee. And so do I have this inclination of being saying yes for the greater good of the group? And again, it is your plate full? Are you able to achieve it? And so you didn't, while you might say, oh, am I being selfish? How you could navigate through that. And what happened was there was a compromise when somebody said, okay, Laura, why don't you take this on? I will help you with it. And so if you really have to be do that greater good for the group, then see if you can partner and bring more people along who would probably help you out, so that we lighten your burden. So use some of these kind of check marks to see whether, are you stressed? Is your plate really full? And how do you then have to make this decision of, should I say no next? And so finally, saying yes or no, I feel is it about maintaining a balance, or is it about all these aspects that you need to make sure where it fits in your goals, your vision, and then trying to see how you can balance between your work and your personal life. So these are just few tips I had, and with that, I gave it a check and I said yes for this presentation. I would be happy to take any questions from you in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining me this morning. I'm Dr. Alyson Hanish, and I'm very happy to be presenting today on a topic that I personally believe is of utmost importance, which is the Early Career Special Interest Group has aptly titled Work-Life Management. I'm going to do my best to tackle this big topic in 15 minutes. I want to preface this talk with, I do not have all the answers to work-life management. Frankly, I'm not certain anyone truly holds all these answers, as these are deeply personal choices and decisions in one's life. However, I can highlight my own personal experiences and demonstrate how I continue to maintain an early career trajectory and my life at the same time. I also want to add that this pandemic has obviously drastically changed work-life balance and work-life management for many academics, including myself. At times, it has felt more like work-life survival, and maybe still does for many of you out there listening, particularly those with young or school-age kids. I don't want to be inconsiderate at all or overlook the impact of the pandemic or pretend that this isn't a major issue for early career academics, as this will undoubtedly will still continue to impact early career academics moving forward. One thing I do have, which is up here on the screen, is a tweet that I put out in June. And I could probably put it up here again in September also, but it says, just a reminder, this pandemic continues to impact academics with young school-age kids. This has not disappeared. Schools may have plans, but they leave parents without childcare or ability to educate children without career burden. Give grace. This tweet gained a lot of social media attention, including an article in the Chronicles of Higher Ed about academic parenting and essentially work-life management. Never in our recent history has an event happened that has truly halted many resources needed for work-life management, including things like childcare and education, leaving many, and particularly parents, in really tough situations. The impact of this pandemic is already being written about in highly prestigious journals, And I would say that as nurses and as nurse leaders, I really advocate for positively using our voice in the terms of work-life management and the resources we provide, because we really want to be on the side of history of doing and giving the resources we needed, not on the other side of what we should have done, because we're already starting to see publications about post-pandemic burnout and the issues that come with that. So now that we touched on the pandemic a little bit, I want to talk about me briefly. I received my bachelor's in science and nursing from the University of Iowa in 2008 and my master's in 2011. I did a pre-doctoral fellowship at NIH. This is through NINR's Graduate Partnerships Program, which is a program where you intramurally complete your dissertation at NIH in Bethesda. Mine was done at the clinical center. I largely worked with pediatric endocrinologists and NICHD, or the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. We studied rare pediatric genetic disorders associated with obesity. My research in my dissertation, though, was largely on these kids with this 1 in a million disorder who had small or absent pineal glands, which is a gland in your brain that produces melatonin that then led to sleep disturbance in these kids. So my background ultimately led to me being a pediatric sleep researcher. My PhD is from Iowa, also in 2015. I chose to do 2 years of a postdoctoral fellowship at UNMC, or the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And I did a joint appointment with the College of Nursing and an institute here we call Monroe-Meyer, which is the institute that works with kids with the diagnosis of a neurodevelopmental disorder. I then took an assistant professor position at UNMC. Very quickly after, I actually just could not stop my passion for being an NP. So I actually went back and did a pediatric primary care NP program and graduated with that in 2019. Currently, I'm still an assistant professor at UNMC, integrating research, education, and practice. And I currently have an NINR-funded KO1 pediatric sleep clinical trial aimed to improve sleep disturbance in kids who have a neurodevelopmental disorder. So this is a very brief overview of me, and this is something you'd often see in presentations or CVs or bio sketches, and this is sort of my academic life in a snapshot. But since we're talking about work-life management, the life part is also missing from this. In 2011, I married my now husband, Michael. The day after our wedding, I actually took my comprehensive exams. And as I was writing these slides, I told my husband I'm still sort of in need of a honeymoon. So hopefully we can add that after this talk. After my comprehensive exams, I moved out to Bethesda. My husband was in training also, and we were not able to live with each other for a couple years due to different training opportunities. The closest we could get him was Princeton and Charlottesville. During my pre-doc, I also had our first child, Elliot, which you'll hear a little bit about because my daughter truly is the inspiration for the research I'm doing right now. During my postdoc, we had our second child, Andy, a beautiful little daughter, and then our third child, Dominic, came in my assistant professor position. During this time, we lived in 8 different apartments or houses. I had maternity leaves of less than 6 weeks. One I was very lucky to have 12 weeks for. There's been times that I've actually even paid more in childcare than I've made in my academic positions. And I've even signed NIH paperwork from the hospital. And I say these things because when I talk to early career students, trainees, professors, I don't want them to feel like they're doing this work-life management inherently wrong, because it's a lot. You're at a time of your life where there's a lot of changes, a lot of choices, there's a lot going on. And for many, this period of their life can be difficult. You'll hear a lot with work-life management that there's this balance or this equilibrium. But really, I conceptualize it as more like it's your life decisions and your aspirations and your goals and how you're going to make them all work together. And I hope in the next 10 minutes or so, you sort of get out of that these are your life choices. Would I make all these choices again? Absolutely not, which I hope you learn a little bit from for me, but I'll forever advocate based on what I learned in my experiences. So things like longer and paid maternity and paternity leave for trainees. So when I think about work-life management, there's a couple don'ts and a couple do's that stand out for me. And this one's sort of a joke, but it's sort of not. This whole don't Google your work-life management. So when I say that, it makes me think about, I'm teaching a first semester course for PhD students right now. And it's like when they put search terms into PubMed and they come out with like 10,000 different articles. and they bury themselves in the articles. And sometimes they come out looking more distraught than when they started because it's information overload. And we teach them to use their resources, to use the librarians and their mentors and experts in the field to sort of winnow down that large amount of information into something that's manageable. And that's why I say don't Google work-life balance or work-life management, because it's a lot of information. The other thing I would suggest in terms of don'ts for work-life management, and this is a mentality that it took a lot of time for me to get over, this concept of it will get better when. It will get better when my kids sleep through the night, or it's going to get better when they're not at daycare getting sick every day, or it's going to get better when I get a different position. This whole concept of it will get better when. Or it'll get better when they start school. And I'm kind of laughing because I kept saying to myself, when they're in school, it'll somehow be better. And now we're in a pandemic and, school is kind of a hot mess right now. But this mentality of it will get better when can be really destructive because it takes you out of living currently and sticking into the future, which can be really, really difficult. Some things I would suggest to do instead is to seek help if you need it from trusted friends, families, colleagues, mental health providers, university-based wellness centers. They're sort of your go-tos in terms of winnowing down that information. Like I said, to not Google work-life management because it's information overload. Use your resources to find out what is offered, what will help you, because you might not need to emulate exactly what other people do, but it's nice to get different perspectives to find out what this work-life management, what's going to work for you out of what you learn. The other thing is to enjoy your life in the now. And I know this is really difficult to do as academics because we're so future oriented on these timelines. I'm not saying I don't have timelines or 1 year, 5 year, 10 year out, but don't let those distract you from living your life currently and how you want to be living in the now also at the same time as projecting out to the future. And that's something that's difficult, but I think super important to balancing work-life management. One thing I think is important to acknowledge is that this work-life management, a lot of these are your choices, but that does not mean everybody is going to agree with your choices. For myself, I've had many academics hint or overtly or somehow allude to that they didn't always love the choices I made at certain times, whether it be kids, which they shouldn't do, but kids or choices of institutions or training programs. But ultimately, these are your life choices. And for me, my life choices really were a blending of work and life, and that got me to where I am in my career and my passion for what I'm doing. So I say this often, if you ever listen to any of my research presentations, is that I am where I am because of them, not despite them. And the them here is my kids and my family. How I discovered my passion. I was at NIH getting training, and I was very open to different research possibilities. I worked with pediatric endocrinologists studying rare genetic pediatric disorders. This particular patient that sticks out, or participant that sticks out to me, came to the NIH Clinical Center. It was a phenotype-genotype protocol, so this is a 1 in a million disorder. These kids came in, and we sat in this room with this family, and we point blank asked her, what is most bothersome to you, or what is your biggest issue right now? And she looked me directly in the eyes and said, my child is not sleeping, we are not sleeping. And at that moment, it literally pierced my soul because this little nugget on the right is my daughter, Elliot, and she did not sleep. And now that I'm a pediatric sleep researcher, I really, truly believe that. She did not sleep for the first year of her life, but I understood what the mom meant by how burdensome, how physically and mentally exhausting and draining it can be when children don't sleep. So for me, my research was sort of this work-life collision. It was a little bit serendipitous, and I don't expect everyone's to work out this way. However, the more I talk to people, the more passionate people that I meet about their research have some sort of blending between their work and their life and how they manage them all together. And ultimately, I think it does bring on better science. I'll often hear, how do you choose the topic? And this is sort of the background of that. It was this collision. So I was at this stage of my life. I talked about NIH during my pre-doc and getting training. And the next thing was, how do I do this? How am I going to do this work-life management? And it's hard. But I do believe that we need to really consider work and life together. So for me, I was finishing up the PhD at NIH, and I was looking to launch my career trajectory in early investigator. And one of the great things about nursing is that there's a plethora of career options. And there are these pivotal moments in your life. And for me, between a PhD and a postdoc or an assistant professor position, where you get to make these choices. And if you know me at all, I'm a pretty type A person, and people would expect extensive spreadsheets, extensively looking at all these schools. And I'm not saying I didn't do that, because I did. But ultimately, how I chose where I was going to spend my postdoc training and eventually an assistant professor position came down to a map. And by the map, I mean it was a 3-hour radius from where my husband and I's parents live in Iowa. We chose that because we no longer wanted to live an airplane life with our parents. We wanted to be able to have the grandparents see their grandkids, for us to have stronger relationships with them and for them to know their cousins. And I say these things because work and life have to go together in order to make this beautiful world happen. So to me, I love pro-con lists. I love rankings and spreadsheets. But for us and my decisions, I urge people to not discredit how important the life part is to your career. So when I sat down to originally do this talk, I thought about the top 5 things I'd want to talk about in terms of work-life management and the strategies that work for me. And as I read these back, it really is funny to me, because I spent part of the pandemic being a parent teacher to my first grader, and a lot of these really seem like all that you needed to know you learned in kindergarten sort of strategies, but nonetheless, I still think they're extremely applicable to work-life management. The top one is to be authentic. And that is even if you're the difficult one. By authentic, I mean be genuine, be you. This comes across really strongly, personally and professionally. And I think it really is inherent to success of work-life management. Be truthful. I think there's no greater time in our world right now, in a pandemic, with systemic racism all over, with a myriad of issues that are happening right now in 2020, that being truthful is an inherent trait personally and professionally. Learn from your past and make the future better for others. That's sort of the stage I'm at now, is learning from what worked and didn't work in work-life management, and hopefully shedding some light to others and how I could potentially help them. 4 is also where I'm at right now. Know when to just step down. Your energy is not endless. This is very difficult to do. Again, nursing has amazing opportunities, a lot of opportunities, but to pick those opportunities that best fit you. Again, your energy isn't endless. And last, but most probably important, when in doubt, give grace. Give grace to yourself, give grace to others. When in doubt, give grace. To sum up work-life management, sort of the story of my life and my husband and 3 kids, and now an NIH-funded study, I really have a strong passion for improving pediatric sleep. And this was based on this work-life collision, that I would call it. And again, I do not have all the answers, but hopefully in our question and answer session to follow this afternoon, I can help answer some of those specific questions you may have. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Rachel Pozzar, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in her 2nd year at the Phyllis F. Cantor Center for Research in Nursing and Patient Care Services at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston. Today, I'm going to talk about chasing squirrels, how to avoid going after every good research question. So for those of you who have dogs or who know something about dogs, you may know that they are distractible. The sight of a squirrel can be enough to make them forget about what they're doing and focus all of their attention on the chase. Researchers, too, can be distractible. The prospect of a new paper, project, or analysis is often enough to pull us away from whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing or finishing. So today I'd like to talk about some strategies that we can use to help us decide whether an opportunity is worth the distraction. But before we get started, I'd like you to take a minute to think about all of the projects that you've completed in the past year. You might want to take out a pencil and a piece of paper and jot them down, put them into the following Venn diagram. You should think about projects that have been stressful. You can also think about the projects that have mattered to your career advancement and the projects that have brought you some personal or professional fulfillment. Many of your projects will fit into more than one category, which is to be expected. So hold on to this piece of paper as we go through this talk. And when the talk is over, revisit your list. Look at your list and ask yourself if there were times when your efforts might have been put to better use elsewhere, and then use this knowledge to make a better and more informed plan for the year to come. So just thought I'd start by introducing the issue of taking on too much, especially among early career academics. So Hollywood and colleagues recently published the results of a study of early career academics, and the sample included early career researchers from the health sciences, social sciences, STEM, and humanities fields. And what they found was that taking on too much was associated with increased career dissatisfaction. And this is intuitive to some extent, but I think it's important to keep in mind that even at this early stage, we can burn ourselves out. In this study, workload and time pressure were among the most common reasons for job dissatisfaction among the study participants. They also found that having an external locus of control, or feeling that you lack control over your workload, was associated with decreased well-being and increased intention to leave academia. So interestingly, high levels of agreeableness were associated with lower levels of work-related happiness. And I think that this highlights the importance of what Nancy just spoke about, which is, of course, not saying yes to everything. So Steve Jobs said, don't try to do everything, do one thing well. And I think it's something that we can all agree on, that it's a good idea to be focused. But as scientists, I also think that it's only natural that we want to explore novel questions and novel ideas. So the real question is, how can we be intellectually curious while still doing our one thing well? So when I began to prepare for this talk, I looked to the literature and I spoke with my mentors. And after processing all the information that I read and that they gave me, I came up with 4 questions that we can ask ourselves when we're appraising new opportunities. These questions, I think, can apply to new papers, new projects, new analyses, anything that imposes an additional demand on your time. So the first question, and probably the biggest question that you can ask yourself, is, will this project, paper, or analysis move my program of research forward? Well, in order to answer this question, you have to have a good sense of what your program of research is. And once you know that, then you can think about whether this particular project will help to move that program forward. So Robertson, Russell, and Morrison have published an excellent guide to writing grant applications. It's called the Grant Application Writer's Workbook. And included in this guide are some step-by-step instructions for clarifying your program of research. The first step is to identify a niche area within your field of interest that hasn't yet been fully explored. Those of you who are in your dissertation phase have probably just done this. Those of us who are postdocs or early career faculty might have done this for our dissertation, but maybe now we're being exposed to a lot of new opportunities and having trouble really clarifying what our program of research is. So the second step is identifying your long-term goal within that niche. And like I said, for those of us in the postdoc or early career phase, identifying this long-term goal might be what helps us to better understand what our program of research is really all about. Once we have a sense of the long-term goal, then we can plot the program of research that's necessary to achieve it. Maybe this is making a major change in patient care. Maybe it's better understanding a phenomenon. Maybe it's contributing to the theoretical literature. Whatever that long-term goal is, that will help to drive the decisions that we make moving forward. And once you have a sense of what that program of research is and what your long-term goal looks like, you can think about the potential contribution of every proposed paper, project, or analysis to your overall program of research. So you can ask yourself, if you're presented with a new opportunity, does this project fit with my conceptual model? Does it complement or does it strengthen my existing work? Does it describe a new problem that might set me off on a path that will bring me closer to achieving what I set out to accomplish than the path that I'm on now? If your projects lack cohesiveness, your trajectory might look something like the top model. You can see that the arrow in the middle is moving towards the long-term goal, but the many side projects are kind of veering off in different directions, and some are even pointing backwards, meaning that they may be consuming too much time or too many resources for you to really make progress toward that long-term goal. On the other hand, the bottom model shows that your many different side projects can take a slightly different path towards that long-term goal, but they're all moving in the same general direction. So maybe they're shining a slightly different light on the problem or the phenomenon that you're studying. Maybe they're using slightly different methods or studying participants who may have a different perspective. In any case, the overall direction is similar, and the many side projects are contributing to the accomplishment of that long-term goal. So the second question, and something that I think all of us consider probably on a near daily basis, is, do I have enough time to do this project well? So, this question is really about getting yourself to start thinking about time management in a strategic way. Not just, do I have time to do this project well in the current moment, but looking forward at my next academic year, will I be able to fit this into the context of everything else that I have planned? So one way that you can do that is by mapping out your projects using a Gantt chart. The image here comes from teamgantt.com. It's teamgantt.com. I have used this website to create a Gantt chart. You can also find Excel templates online. You can do them in pencil and paper if you prefer. But the idea behind a Gantt chart is that you have headings that represent each project you're working on. Then for each project, you have tasks, and you map out, as if on a linear calendar, how long each of those tasks will take you and when you plan to perform them. So for instance, if I'm presented with a new opportunity that's going to keep me busy next summer, I can look at my Gantt chart, I can scroll ahead to June or July 2021, see what else I have planned for that period of time. Maybe there's a grant that's going to be due at that time and don't feel that I can take on any more writing projects. Or maybe it's totally empty and I'll be glad for the work. I think that a Gantt chart really helps you look farther into the future and get a big picture view of your commitments, not just in the moment, but over a longer stretch of time. Another related piece of advice that I have come across and also heard in my department is that it's okay to pick the low-hanging fruit. So what this means is that when you're thinking about time, it's worth considering the option of finishing the task that is closest to completion. When something is almost done, it's still not done. And so if you can rather easily finish a task, submit a manuscript, make a revision, get something completely off your plate, it's probably worth doing that as opposed to starting a new project. The challenge is that a lot of researchers find starting a new project to be fun and energizing and interesting. And a lot of us, I think, tend to dread actually getting that manuscript in, making the necessary revisions, and things, often just sit. So if you think about this as a way to boost your productivity with less work, because you're not designing a new study, you're not applying to the IRB, and you're not looking for new collaborators, I think that keeping this in mind can help you be a little bit more productive. And another analogy that I have also heard that I like is the jumbo jet analogy. So this analogy basically says that if you're just leaving multiple unfinished projects up in the air, you're acting like an air traffic controller, when in reality what you should be doing is just landing the plane. Land the plane that's closest to the ground and pick the low-hanging fruit. So the third question that you can ask yourself is, will this project, paper, or analysis make a meaningful difference? And this question may relate to your career trajectory. It might relate, as I said before, to your program of research, or it might relate to patient care. So there are several different ways in which a project can be meaningful, and it doesn't always have to mean a paper or a presentation. Some of the ways in which a project could be meaningful are they could support an upcoming grant application. They could provide needed data for a grant application or preliminary results to show that your hypothesis is supported. A project might help you establish a collaborative relationship with somebody that could serve as a mentor moving forward. A project might have a big impact on patient care. It could distinguish you as an expert. It could help you test or even as a trainee learn a novel method. And it can bring personal or professional satisfaction. All of these are legitimate reasons to consider taking on a new project or engaging with a new opportunity. And so the last question I would recommend asking yourself is, have you consulted your mentors? I know that I like to run any potential new projects or collaborations by my mentors because I find that they often have insights into opportunities that I wouldn't have considered. There are things that I might have said no to had a mentor not suggested that it would be a worthy collaboration or a worthy project to take on. And in those cases, the mentor was right. So it's really helpful to ask those who are more experienced than we are for their insights and to take their advice and to ask several different people to get a variety of perspectives, because that's very helpful as well. So there's a nice quote from Van Gogh that I found as I was looking for information on this topic. And Van Gogh said that if one is master of one thing and understands one thing well, one has at the same time insight into an understanding of many things. So this is kind of a reminder that even if you're committed to your program of research and this focused career trajectory, it doesn't mean that your understanding or that your research is not multifaceted. And when we think about our phenomena of interest, we often examine our phenomena from multiple different perspectives. We use different methods, we partner with different collaborators, we recruit from different study sites, and in doing so, we gain understanding of many different things, not just a single problem or a single method. And so it's possible to be both focused and to have an understanding of a broad spectrum of topics and methods. So I just want to acknowledge my two mentors who helped me brainstorm ideas for this talk. Donna Berry is at the University of Washington and Marilyn Hammer is at Dana-Farber. And I also want to acknowledge my funding sources, American Cancer Society, Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and the Society for Medical Decision Making. And these are my references. You can see the citation for the Grant Writer's Handbook. That's a helpful tool if any of you are planning to write a grant application soon. Thanks so much for your attention. Look forward to the Q&A.
Hi, my name is Ansley Stanfill. I am an associate professor and the associate dean of research for the College of Nursing at University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm here to talk to you today about avoiding imposter syndrome, a major early career trap. And so first we're going to talk about what is imposter syndrome and then how imposter syndrome can really harm your career. And then finally, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can overcome this early career trap. And so in order to correct a problem, it always starts with recognition that there is a problem. And so imposter syndrome is a persistence of feelings of inadequacy that continue despite your evident success. And so essentially people with imposter syndrome have feelings of severe inadequacy and self-doubt that can leave people feeling that they will be exposed as a fraud and that they really don't deserve what they've achieved. They attribute their success to luck, or that they've somehow duped others into believing that they're more intelligent or more capable than they actually are. And so this happens because people having this problem really fail to internalize their accomplishments, no matter how successful they are in their field. And in fact, high achieving, highly successful people often suffer the worst. So imposter syndrome does not equate to low self-esteem or a lack of self-confidence at all. Some researchers have linked it with perfectionism, especially in women and among academics. And so citations out there say that about 70% of academics experience this at some point in their career. I personally would argue that basically every high achieving person you know has had these feelings at some point during their career. It just happens, and it's really normal to go through this at some point or another. And so how do you know if you're having imposter syndrome? I have some common symptoms listed here, but this overarching theme is that despite being successful and despite being a high achiever, there's ultimately this fear as being discovered as a fraud, or that others may find out that you don't know as much as others think you do. And so academia provides lots of opportunities for imposter syndrome to raise its ugly head, such as anytime you're giving a presentation, you're sending out a publication, you're competing for awards, getting grants or lecturing to students. All of that contributes. But I also think some entanglement of our work with social media adds to this pressure and can really exacerbate some of the symptoms that are detailed here. And this occurs through comparison to others, which raises a constant cycle of self-doubt and inadequacy. And so one common thought that people that are experiencing imposter syndrome have is that really their success is no big deal. They experience imposter syndrome. They attribute their success as being an easy task. It wasn't that hard. We had lots of support to get this done. And ultimately, they just really have a hard time accepting the compliment that the accolade gives them. And so again, they think that the success is down to luck or good timing, or that they fooled other people. And then another common thought that they may have is that I must not fail. And there can be a really huge amount of pressure currently to not fail so that you aren't found out as a fraud. And so almost all people that do experience imposter syndrome report having the thought of, I feel like a fake up here. And imposters believe that they don't deserve success or that they don't deserve the personal accolades. And they feel that somehow others have been deceived into thinking otherwise. They just believe that they give this impression that they're more competent than they actually are. And ultimately, they have these deep feelings that they lack expertise or they lack knowledge in a particular area. And so sometimes they believe they don't deserve a promotion or a new position, and they're anxious that somebody making the decision actually made a mistake. And so they may attribute it to it's all down to luck. And this tendency to attribute success to luck or to other external reasons and not to their own abilities is really the clear indicator of imposter syndrome. And so in her book, Valerie Young describes 5 types of imposter syndrome. We're going to go through them here. Valerie Young is really the expert on this issue. And if you're interested in this topic, I highly suggest that you read her book. But the first type is the perfectionist. And so perfectionists are never going to be satisfied, and they always feel that no matter what, their work could have been just a little bit better. And so rather than focusing on what they're good at and their strengths, they tend to really fixate on any flaws or mistakes that occur. And so this really leads to a great deal of self-pressure, and it leads to high levels of anxiety overall. And the next type is the superhero. And because these people feel a little bit inadequate, they feel compelled to push themselves to work absolutely as hard as possible and as long as possible, and that somehow this is going to lead to success. And then the next type is the expert. And so these individuals are always trying to learn more, and they're never satisfied with their level of understanding of their phenomenon. And so even though they're often very highly skilled, they still underrate their own expertise. And then the next type is the natural genius. And these people set these impossibly high goals for themselves. And then when they don't succeed on the very first try, they feel absolutely crushed. And then finally, the soloist. These people are very individual, and they prefer to work alone. That self-worth stems from their productivity. So when other people offer assistance, they tend to reject it and feel if they ask for any help, that that's actually a sign of weakness. And so as I mentioned, imposter syndrome is very common in women in academia, but is especially common in female minorities in academia and in the STEM in particular. But do you guys recognize any of these women? They're pretty famous, pretty high achieving people. And all of them have spoken publicly about their struggles with imposter syndrome. And in fact, on the top right, Maya Angelou once said, I've written 11 books, But each time I do, I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. And so it's really important to identify and then be able to conquer your imposter syndrome, because it really ultimately hurts your career. And this fear of failure can lead you to not seek out opportunities for advancement. And sadly, imposter syndrome doesn't allow you to enjoy the successes that you do have. And this creates a cycle of downplaying achievements that you do have, and then not being able to live up to the next level. And so you have this constant anxiety, which in turn will harm your health. And so in the next section of the talk, I'm going to discuss what we can do about it. And so the first thing that you can really do is try to reframe your thoughts. And so when you find yourself in a situation that's a little bit outside your comfort zone and you have these feelings of doubt, don't focus on your failures. Think about how you are bringing a new perspective to the situation that others may not have. And then realize every time you push against that comfort zone, you are learning and growing. And so even if you ultimately fail, that's okay, because there's something to be learned from failure. And ultimately, every failure is going to make you better and stronger on the next go round. And so it's really important also to talk about your feelings with your close mentors and your allies. And I guarantee you 100% of the time, there are colleagues out there that have dealt with these feelings, and your mentors had to learn how to control these internal demons. We'll talk about those internal demons in a minute. But they had to learn how to conquer them to get where they are in their career. And then probably most importantly, our internal monologue is often our harshest critic. And so imagine some of those horrible internal thoughts that you sometimes have, if they were brought out externally, and say they were directed at your very best friend in the whole world. You wouldn't stand for that. If somebody was talking about your best friend like that, you would not stand for that. And so ultimately, we have to be just as kind to ourselves as we are often to other people. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal experience with imposter syndrome and what really helped me personally in controlling, if not always totally eliminating, these things. And so in preparation for this talk, I did a little clicking around on the internet, and I tripped over this really great website. It's called rockyourresearch.com. They have a bunch of really interesting and helpful early career podcasts. And I thought this little cartoon here was pretty cute, and it was at the top of an imposter syndrome article. And to some extent, it does feel like this to someone who's experiencing imposter syndrome. At first, you get the award or the fellowship or the publication, and you're overjoyed. And for me, I found that early in my career, I would definitely celebrate for a minute. But then shortly thereafter, I felt like I would start to have some of the feelings of imposter syndrome, and I started to doubt myself a little bit. And so what really helped for me was to hone my expertise and to keep on practicing my craft. And so I felt like more knowledge would help me adjust from that self-doubt. But I really wasn't always sure how to transition in the imposter syndrome diagram from that left-hand side over to the reality of the right-hand side. And so I really had to think a little bit about what I needed to become an expert. It probably isn't realistic that I could be an expert in everything out there, but it is realistic that I could think about what pieces I need, and I would carve off those different pieces and then put my own unique ideas, my unique spin, my unique perspective on all of that, and get these collective group of thoughts working in the same direction. And so a lot of times that kind of defines what is an expert. And so they have the experience and the knowledge to understand where the overlaps in those various areas lie. So hello, I'm an expert. And so, for instance, I knew early on when I came into the PhD program, I knew that I wanted to have a program of research someday in the genomics of recovery after stroke. This blended my clinical experience in neuroscience and a problem that I was passionate about for many reasons, and including personal experience, and improving outcomes and quality of life for stroke survivors. And then it also added my interest in my work in multi-omics. And so throughout my doctoral period and my postdoctoral work, and throughout my early career period, I knew that I needed to develop a skill set in genomics. I needed to work in neurology and neurosurgical patient care, and very specifically within the form of stroke that I'm most interested in, which is subarachnoid hemorrhage. But then because of what I was seeing in the clinical population I was working with, I knew that I needed some expertise in health disparities for outcomes and survivors. And so over time, I also found that I needed to hone my skills in grant writing, in presentation and dissemination, and in other areas too. And so I decided to do absolutely everything I could do to develop this expertise and beat down my feelings of imposter syndrome. And so I read and I thought and I attended all the lectures, I designed and I conducted and I failed, and I reframed many smaller studies and I presented them and I got feedback. And then I used that to better design my next study with every single failure. And as I did this process over and over and over again, every time that little imposter syndrome voice in my head got a bit smaller. And so each time I did that, each time I gave a presentation, each time I published a paper, wrote a grant, got an award, that sneaky little devil would pop up in my brain and say those awful imposter syndrome thoughts. But each time I practiced, his voice got a little bit smaller. And then my confidence started to grow. And so I did it again and again until finally my inner voice more often said, "You got this." And so I would be lying if I said those thoughts never ever come up anymore. And you can see how I laid out the slide. I did so very deliberately. You can see that the edges of those thoughts still pop out, but every time that I present, every time that I write a grant, publish a paper, etc., their outline fades a little bit. And so I really hope that this presentation and my own experience with imposter syndrome has helped you think about this issue. If you're interested, the references are located on each slide, but here's a couple of other sites that you may find helpful if you're having difficulties with the doubts that imposter syndrome can brew.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our session. My name is Breanna Hetland, and I am going to be just leading a quick Q&A until about 11:45. So if you do have questions for any one of our presenters, I ask that you go to the little box on your left hand of your screen and that has a question mark on it and just submit it there. So I'm going to start with one question for Dr. Diaz first as I read your questions on the side to get caught up. So first question I have for you. You talked a lot about creating a plan that you feel passionate about and using mentors to guide that plan. But how do you navigate a situation where mentors might not agree with the plan that you set out? How do you navigate that so that you can find a path in the middle that works?
I think in your question, thank you, Breanna, for that question. It's really good. But I think in your question, you kind of answered it as in finding the middle path. Because I think Ansley touched this in the sense, she said, whenever you are taking major decisions, consult with your mentors first. Also, when you decide on taking a mentor, you always try to find the best fit. I was blessed when, especially for my PhD mentor, I had a mentor who understood my family situation as much as my work situation. And so we would both talk whether does this match into my lifestyle balance. And so having that conversation before and then making priorities based on, so taking a middle step would be is what fits best into your priorities and picking the first top three in order to take that middle path.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else on our panel have any thoughts about that question? All right, I'm going to pose a question from the chat box that I see here, and I think it's something that's really important, especially considering our times that we're in right now. But do you have any advice or comments regarding mental health in PhD students and early career faculty members?
I thought it was really interesting that throughout the different talks, there were a lot of comments about being kind to yourself. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that can really impact mental health. And I would also say, too, that it's important during these times and these pandemics to find a way to connect, whether that's socially distant. I know that I've been having outside meeting at patios or parks or whatever, socially distant, very safe activities, but outdoors. that still allow me to connect with members of my lab and my colleagues. And so that's really been helping my mental health to have some sense of normalcy in a situation that's really not normal at all.
Absolutely. I would also suggest things like Zoom has become part of our life, right? But not just using Zoom for professional work and meetings, but using it for fun, like doing Zoom lunches or doing Zoom, having drinks together, whatever. So, but doing it via Zoom and using that as time out to to have that social activity. All of those things are required to just de-stress and take time for yourself.
I'd like to add one more comment related to that too. I just remembered, our College of Nursing has really been promoting mental health and connectivity through the pandemic. And one of the things that we've been doing is using an app called Pacer. And we've been having little competitive challenges, like how many steps can you get in a day? How many flights of stairs can you climb? Those sorts of things. And there's a little bit of friendly competition in the chat rooms on Pacer app. About, well, I think I can do better than you this week, and there's little small prizes like Starbucks gift cards and things like that. And so that's kind of a fun way to stay connected with your friends too, that is up and moving, which also impacts mental health.
Yeah, I would just add to that, taking an intentional break from the pandemic. So for instance, I think we all have the habit of sort of doom scrolling on our phone, reading social media or newspaper articles about the latest crises that are happening. And I think it's super important to commit to only, allowing yourself to consume that sort of media for a set amount of time each day. And instead really prioritizing things like getting outside. I've, started putting my phone on the other side of my bedroom and reading a real book before I go to sleep each night. I think just being able to step back and let yourself sort of let your mind relax at certain times of the day can be really helpful as well.
That's great advice. There are days when I just want to throw my phone. If it didn't cost so much, I'd seriously do it. There's a question on the side box here related to leveraging your experience prior to your PhD to kind of accelerate this early career process. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
So I was teaching before I did my PhD, and so having that experience in academia prior to doing a PhD kind of gave me some insight on what my post-PhD life would be. And so I was deliberate in saying, okay, I want to do a postdoc so that I focus and get a research path before I go back into academia. And then I learned of the do's and don'ts as to not taking too many committee assignments and things like that, which get thrown to you. I kind of tried to say no to those opportunities if they came. So yes, your past experience can always help you as you choose your career forward.
Yeah, I just want to add one way in which that might be helpful too, that extensive experience that this person says that they have. You probably have many contacts in the clinical and academic settings, and so use those contacts. Those clinical contacts could serve as people who could assist you with recruitment moving forward, and academic contacts, you could work with them and collaborate on publications, things like that. So use your network that you've built.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Hanish, but I would like everyone to give a one statement, very quick answer. We only have just about a minute and a half left. We're in a pandemic. We're early career members. There's a lot going on. Talk about work-life management and how do you measure that success right now as an early career member? So if everybody can just give me a one quick statement, and then I'll go ahead and close our session.
Wonderful. Thanks for asking that. So measuring work-life success right now is going to require probably some readjustment for many people. Comparing your prior goals to what's realistic during a pandemic and what you think you can actually get done. Because there's nothing worse, I think, for many academics than not meeting their goals. But when you set yourself up to not be able to even attain them realistically, it's setting yourself up for failure. So I'd really reevaluate what you can get done right now.
Thank you. Anybody else have any quick thoughts?
I think
sorry, go ahead, Nancy.
No, go ahead.
For me, it's whether my family is healthy, safe, and generally happy. And in terms of work, if I've done the things that I need to do to continue moving forward even after the pandemic. All of the nice to have projects might fall by the wayside, but if I can at least hang on to my primary goals, I'm happy.
Yeah. Simple, but I love it. And I'm so sorry. We are at 12:30, so I'm going to have to cut us off. I want to say thank you so much to our presenters for putting the time into this. This was extremely valuable for me, and I know all of our other viewers. I do want to say, if anyone is interested in learning more about the Early Career Special Interest Group, please do check us out on our webpage on the CANS website. You can contact us directly if you would like. So on behalf of myself, Dr. Diaz, Dr. Hanish, Dr. Pozzar, and Dr. Stanfill, we just really appreciate your time and your thoughts and guidance, and good luck to everyone, our panel and our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.